In the last video, I went over an example or a couple of examples of how to use inputs and outputs. I'm going to give you one more example as well. So our functions don't actually have to be called just f of x. They can be called g of x, h of x, j of x. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to give you a different example. So now let's say if I give you something called g of x. So instead of f, I just call it g. It doesn't really matter what we call it. Just remember that x is the input and g of x, this whole thing, is the output. So anyways, in this case, it's going to be g of x is 2x squared minus 1. So let's go over a couple of examples. So let's firstly go over g of 1. So if I go over g of 1, what that means is it's 2 times something squared minus 1, and that something is going to be 1. So let's go. So what this means, well, 1 squared is 1, so it's going to be 2 times 1 minus 1. So it's going to be 2 minus 1, which is equal to 1. So for an input of 1, I have an output of 1. Let's do g of 3. So if I do g of 3, it's equal to 2 times, let me just do that again. It's 2 times something squared minus 1. And that something is the input, obviously, and that happens to be 3. So let's do this again. Well, 3 squared is 9. So it's 2 times 9 minus 1. 2 times 9 is 18, so it's 18 minus 1, and that's equal to 17. All right? Let's do g of, this time I'm going to have the input as negative 4. And if I do it that way, it's 2 times, let me get it in green. Let me do that. So 2 squared minus 1, and that something this time happens to be negative 4. And if you remember, when you square a negative number, it becomes positive. So negative 4 squared is 16, so it's 2 times 16 minus 1. And 2 times 16, well, that's 32. That's 32 minus 1, so the answer is 31. All right, and finally, let's do g of the number 0. All right, so if we have the number 0, so it's basically 2 something squared minus 1, and that something happens to be 0, because that's just simply what we put for the input. And let's do this. So 0 squared is 0, and 2, so it's 2 times 0 minus 1. What's 2 times 0? Well, that's 0. So it's 0 minus 1. So your answer is simply negative 1. All right, that's it for my examples for inputs and outputs, and I'll see you in the next video.